Patrice Lumumba emerged as a pivotal figure in the heart of Africa during a period of immense change. He was a man of strong convictions and powerful oratory. In May 1960, he achieved a historic milestone, becoming the first democratically elected Prime Minister of the Congo. This vast, resource-rich nation was on the cusp of gaining its independence from Belgian colonial rule. Lumumba represented the aspirations of millions of Congolese people. They yearned for self-determination and an end to decades of exploitation. His election was seen not just as a political victory, but as the dawn of a new era for both the Congo and the wider African continent. The air in Leopoldville, now Kinshasa, was thick with anticipation and hope. Lumumba's party, the Movement National Congolais, had campaigned on a platform of national unity and genuine independence. He envisioned a Congo free from foreign domination, where its immense natural wealth would benefit its own people. His charisma and unwavering commitment to these ideals resonated deeply. He was not merely a politician, he was a symbol of liberation. Many across Africa and the world looked to him as a leader who could forge a new path for post-colonial nations, one of sovereignty and dignity. His journey to power was swift, mirroring the rapid pace of decolonization sweeping the globe. Lumumba's vision, however, was radical for its time, particularly in the eyes of the outgoing colonial powers and Western nations. He spoke passionately about economic independence and Pan-African solidarity. He believed that African nations needed to unite to resist neo-colonial influences. These were ideas that challenged the established global order, an order still heavily influenced by colonial interests and the emerging Cold War dynamics. His determination to assert Congolese sovereignty over its resources, including vast deposits of copper, cobalt and uranium, immediately set him on a collision course with powerful international forces who had long benefited from Congo's riches under Belgian rule. The significance of Lumumba's premiership cannot be overstated. For the first time, a black African leader, chosen by his own people, stood at the helm of one of Africa's largest and most strategically important countries. His ascent to power was a beacon, illuminating the possibility of a future where African nations could determine their own destinies. However, this beacon of hope also cast long shadows, attracting the attention of those who saw his independent stance as a threat. The path ahead for Lumumba and the newly independent Congo would be fraught with peril, a testament to the complex and often brutal realities of decolonization in a world divided by ideology and greed. The Congo officially gained its independence from Belgium on the 30th of June 1960. The celebrations, however, were quickly overshadowed by immense challenges. The colonial administration had done little to prepare the country for self-governance. There were few Congolese university graduates, doctors or engineers. The army, the force publique, was still commanded by Belgian officers. Within days of independence, this army mutinied against its white officers, demanding better pay and the removal of their Belgian commanders. This unrest plunged the nascent nation into chaos, creating a power vacuum and an atmosphere of instability that would prove disastrous for Lumumba's government. This internal strife was almost immediately compounded by external interference. The mineral-rich province of Katanga, vital to the Congolese economy, declared its secession from the Congo on the 11th of July 1960. This move was orchestrated and heavily supported by Belgian mining interests, particularly the powerful Union Minière du Haut-Katanga. Belgian troops, ostensibly sent to protect Belgian citizens, also played a role in bolstering the Katangese secession led by Moise Tshomba. Lumumba viewed this secession as a Belgian-backed plot to dismember the Congo and retain control over its valuable resources, a clear act of neo-colonial aggression designed to cripple his government from the outset. Faced with a disintegrating army and a secessionist crisis, Lumumba initially appealed to the United Nations for assistance. He requested UN troops to help restore order and, crucially, to end the Katangese secession. While the UN did deploy a peacekeeping force, its mandate was limited. It was not explicitly tasked with, nor did it actively attempt to forcibly end the Katanga secession. This reluctance frustrated Lumumba immensely. He felt the UN was unwilling to confront Belgian interference directly. He believed the international body was not acting decisively to uphold the territorial integrity of the member state, a new African nation struggling for its very survival. This desperate situation led Lumumba to make a fateful decision. Feeling abandoned by the West and the UN, he threatened to seek assistance from the Soviet Union. In the heated climate of the Cold War, this was an alarming prospect for the United States and its allies. The idea of Soviet influence gaining a foothold in strategically vital Central Africa, a region rich in uranium and other critical minerals, was anathema to Western powers. Lumumba's outreach, born of desperation to save his country's unity, was interpreted as a definitive shift towards the Eastern Bloc. This perception sealed his fate in the eyes of Washington and Brussels, transforming him from a nationalist leader into a dangerous radical. The internal and external pressures on Patrice Lumumba's government mounted relentlessly throughout the summer of 1960. His impassioned, often fiery speeches denouncing Belgian interference and Western complicity further alienated him from powerful international actors. Within Congo, political rivalries festered. President Joseph Kasavubu, a more conservative figure, grew increasingly wary of Lumumba's perceived radicalism and his popular appeal. The stage was being set for a showdown not just between Lumumba and external forces, but also within the Congolese political establishment itself. The dream of a united, independent Congo was rapidly unraveling under the weight of these combined pressures. On the 5th of September 1960, President Kasavubu took the controversial step of dismissing Lumumba as Prime Minister. Lumumba, in turn, declared Kasavubu deposed. This constitutional crisis created a dangerous stalemate, further destabilizing the country. Just days later, on the 14th of September 1960, Colonel Joseph Désiré Mobutu, the army chief of staff whom Lumumba himself had appointed, announced a military coup. Mobutu declared that he was neutralizing both Lumumba and Kasavubu, temporarily taking control to restore order. In reality, this coup was a decisive blow against Lumumba, effectively removing him from power and placing him under house arrest, watched by UN troops. The coup led by Mobutu was not a spontaneous event arising solely from internal Congolese dynamics. It was actively encouraged and supported by Western intelligence agencies, most notably the United States Central Intelligence Agency and Britain's MI6. Both agencies saw Lumumba as a threat to their interests in the region. They feared his nationalist policies and his potential alignment with the Soviet Union. The UN peacekeepers present in Leopoldville also played a role, however passive, by not intervening to protect the democratically elected Prime Minister or to prevent Mobutu's unconstitutional seizure of power. Their inaction effectively facilitated Lumumba's downfall. Lumumba's removal from office marked a critical turning point. Confined to his residence, he was isolated but remained a potent symbol of Congolese nationalism. His supporters continued to agitate for his reinstatement. The West, however, saw his neutralization as a victory. President Dwight Eisenhower of the United States had reportedly expressed a desire for Lumumba's elimination. With Lumumba sidelined, the path was cleared for a more compliant leadership in Congo, one that would be more amenable to Western economic and strategic interests. The brief, hopeful chapter of Lumumba's premiership was drawing to a violent close, orchestrated by a confluence of local rivalries and international intrigue. Belgium, the former colonial power, played a particularly insidious and direct role in the downfall and subsequent assassination of Patrice Lumumba. Despite granting Congo independence, Belgian interests remained deeply embedded in the country, especially within its lucrative mining sector in Katanga. Lumumba's nationalist rhetoric and his determination to ensure that Congo's wealth benefited the Congolese people directly threatened these long-standing economic advantages. The Belgian government and powerful Belgian corporations were unwilling to cede control over resources they had exploited for decades. They viewed Lumumba as an obstacle to their continued prosperity and influence in the region. From the moment of independence, Belgian officials and military officers actively worked to undermine Lumumba's authority. They provided crucial support, including military personnel and financial aid, to Moise Tshombe's secessionist regime in Katanga. This was a deliberate strategy to weaken the central government and maintain Belgian access to Katanga's copper, cobalt and uranium. Belgian advisors were present in Katanga, guiding Tshombe's administration and military operations. The Belgian government's official line was one of non-interference, but their actions on the ground told a very different story, one of covert manipulation aimed at destabilizing Lumumba's leadership and fracturing the young nation. When Lumumba was eventually captured by forces loyal to Mobutu and then transferred to Katanga in January 1961, Belgian officers were directly involved in his mistreatment and execution. Reports and subsequent investigations, including a Belgian parliamentary inquiry in 2001, confirmed the presence of Belgian personnel during Lumumba's final days. These individuals participated in his torture and were present at his execution. The inquiry concluded that the Belgian government bore a moral responsibility for the circumstances leading to Lumumba's murder. In 2002, Belgium formally apologized for its role in the events, a belated acknowledgement of its culpability in the death of Congo's first prime minister. The motive behind Belgium's actions was clear: to protect its substantial economic interests and to prevent a truly independent nationalist government from taking root in Congo. Lumumba's vision of economic self-sufficiency and Pan-Africanism was fundamentally at odds with Belgium's neo-colonial ambitions. By supporting the Katanga secession and facilitating Lumumba's removal and death, Belgium aimed to install a more pliable regime that would safeguard its access to Congo's vast mineral wealth. The legacy of this interference would cast a long shadow over Congo's future, contributing to decades of instability and authoritarian rule. Section 5. Cold War Pawns, American and British Machinations. The assassination of Patrice Lumumba cannot be understood outside the geopolitical context of the Cold War. For the United States and its Western allies, including Great Britain, the primary concern in newly independent African nations was preventing the spread of Soviet influence. Lumumba's strong nationalist stance, his criticism of Western powers, and crucially, his appeal for Soviet aid when he felt abandoned by the UN, immediately flagged him as a potential communist sympathizer, or at best, a neutralist who could tilt towards the Eastern Bloc. In the Manichaean worldview of the Cold War, neutrality was often equated with siding with the enemy. The United States, under President Dwight D. Eisenhower, viewed Lumumba with deep suspicion. Declassified documents and testimonies have since revealed that Eisenhower directly authorized the CIA to undertake operations to remove Lumumba from power, including assassination plots. One infamous CIA plan involved sending a scientist to Congo with a vial of lethal poison, intended to be administered to Lumumba, perhaps through his toothpaste. While this specific plot was not carried out, it demonstrates the extent to which the US government was prepared to go to eliminate a leader they deemed a threat. The CIA actively supported Mobutu's coup and provided financial and logistical assistance to anti-Lumumba factions. Britain's MI6 also played a significant, albeit more secretive, role. Recently declassified files and historical research suggest that MI6 was involved in supporting the coup that overthrew Lumumba and had its own intelligence operatives on the ground working to undermine him. British interests in Central Africa, including access to raw materials and maintaining regional stability conducive to Western influence, aligned with those of the United States. The Frantz Fanon quote, "Africa is shaped like a gun, and the Congo is its trigger," powerfully underscored Congo's strategic importance. Controlling Congo meant controlling a key part of the continent, and Lumumba was seen as an unreliable custodian of this trigger. The fear was not just about Congo itself, but also about Lumumba's potential to inspire other African leaders. His vision of a united Africa, free from foreign domination, resonated with many emerging nations. This Pan-African ideal, coupled with his perceived leftist leanings, was seen as a direct challenge to Western hegemony. The exploitation of Congo's raw materials, essential for modern technology and Western military capabilities, was a paramount concern. Therefore, ensuring a pro-Western government in Leopoldville was a strategic imperative for both Washington and London. Lumumba, with his unyielding independence, simply did not fit their Cold War calculus. Section 6, the United Nations, a failure to protect. The United Nations' involvement in the Congo crisis of 1960 to 1961 is a complex and controversial chapter in the organization's history. When Patrice Lumumba appealed for UN assistance to counter the Belgian-backed Katanga secession and restore order, the UN did respond by deploying one of its largest peacekeeping missions to date, ONUC, the United Nations operation in Congo. However, the mandate and actions of ONUC often appeared to serve Western interests rather than unequivocally supporting the legitimate, democratically elected government of Lumumba. This perceived bias and inaction at critical moments contributed significantly to Lumumba's tragic fate. A key point of contention was ONUC's refusal to use force to end the Katanga secession. Lumumba had expected the UN to help preserve Congo's territorial integrity, but the UN leadership, heavily influenced by Western powers on the Security Council, adopted a more cautious approach. They focused on maintaining a fragile peace and preventing a direct Cold War confrontation, rather than actively siding with Lumumba against the secessionists and their Belgian backers. This stance deeply frustrated Lumumba and led him to seek alternative, more direct forms of assistance, including his ill-fated outreach to the Soviet Union, which further alarmed Western capitals. Furthermore, when Colonel Mobutu launched his coup in September 1960, UN peacekeepers stationed in Leopoldville did not intervene to protect Prime Minister Lumumba or to uphold the constitutional order. While Lumumba was placed under house arrest, UN troops surrounded his residence, ostensibly for his protection. However, this protection effectively became a form of imprisonment, isolating him from his supporters and preventing him from exercising his duties as Prime Minister. Later, when Lumumba attempted to flee Leopoldville to join his supporters in Stanleyville, now Kisangani, UN forces did not prevent his capture by Mobutu's troops, a critical failure that sealed his doom. The support of UN peacekeepers for the military coup, even if passive, was a damning indictment of the mission's neutrality. Some sources explicitly state that UN peacekeepers supported the coup. The UN Secretary-General at the time, Dag Hammarskjöld, found himself in an incredibly difficult position, navigating intense Cold War pressures. However, the outcome was that the UN, an organization founded to protect the sovereignty of nations, failed to protect the democratically elected leader of a new member state. This failure in Congo had profound implications, not only for the future of that nation, but also for the credibility of the UN in the eyes of many newly independent countries in Africa and Asia. Section 7, the final days: abduction, torture and assassination. After his house arrest in Leopoldville following Mobutu's coup, Patrice Lumumba remained a potent political force. His supporters controlled a significant portion of eastern Congo, based in Stanleyville. Fearing his potential return to power, Lumumba's enemies were determined to silence him permanently. In late November 1960, Lumumba decided to escape his UN-guarded residence and make his way to Stanleyville to rally his followers. His escape was short-lived. He was captured on the 1st of December 1960 by troops loyal to Colonel Mobutu, reportedly with logistical assistance from Western intelligence agencies who tracked his movements. His capture marked the beginning of a brutal ordeal. Lumumba, along with two political associates, Maurice Mpolo and Joseph Okito, was publicly humiliated and beaten. He was imprisoned first near Leopoldville and then, on the 17th of January 1961, flown to Elizabethville, now Lubumbashi, the capital of the secessionist Katanga province. This transfer was a death sentence. Katanga, led by Moise Tshombe, was virulently hostile to Lumumba, and its regime was heavily influenced by Belgian officials and settlers who despised him. The decision to send him there was made by the authorities in Leopoldville, with the clear complicity of foreign powers. In Katanga, Lumumba and his companions were subjected to further savage torture at the hands of Katangese forces and Belgian officers. Eyewitness accounts and later investigations have pieced together the horrific details of their final hours. They were beaten mercilessly. On the evening of the 17th of January 1961, Patrice Lumumba, Maurice Mpolo, and Joseph Okito were taken to a secluded spot outside Elizabethville and executed by a firing squad. Belgian officers were reportedly present, and some may have participated in the killings. The execution was carried out under the authority of the Katangan government. but the web of complicity stretched far beyond Katanga, reaching Leopoldville, Brussels, Washington, and London. To prevent Lumumba's grave from becoming a shrine and a rallying point for his supporters, his enemies went to gruesome lengths. His body, along with those of Mpolo and Okito, was initially buried in a shallow grave. However, fearing discovery, Belgian police officer Gerard Soet and his brother were ordered to exhume the bodies. They dismembered them and then dissolved them in sulfuric acid. All that remained of Patrice Lumumba were reportedly some teeth and a few bullets. This barbaric act was intended to erase Lumumba from history, but instead it cemented his status as a martyr for Congolese independence and African liberation. Section 8. A Martyr's Enduring Legacy, Icon of Liberation. Despite the brutal attempts to obliterate his memory, Patrice Lumumba's assassination transformed him into an enduring international symbol of anti-colonial struggle and a martyr for African sovereignty. His courage in the face of overwhelming odds, his unwavering commitment to a truly independent Congo, and his tragic death at the hands of powerful domestic and international forces resonated deeply across Africa and the developing world. He became a potent emblem of the injustices of neocolonialism and the high price paid by those who dared to challenge the established global order. His name became synonymous with the fight for genuine liberation. In Congo itself, Lumumba's legacy has been complex and often contested, particularly during the long, repressive rule of Mobutu Sese Seko, who ironically declared Lumumba a national hero years after playing a key role in his demise. However, for many Congolese, Lumumba represents the unfulfilled promise of their nation's independence, a vision of unity, sovereignty, and prosperity that was tragically cut short. He is remembered as a leader who put the interests of his people first, a stark contrast to many who followed. Streets, squares, and even a major university bear his name, testaments to his enduring significance in the national consciousness. Beyond Congo's borders, Lumumba became a Pan-African icon. His powerful speeches at the dawn of independence, asserting African dignity and demanding respect, inspired a generation of activists and leaders across the continent. Figures like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana saw Lumumba as a kindred spirit in the quest for African unity and self-reliance. His assassination sent shockwaves through the continent, serving as a grim warning of the forces arrayed against radical change. Moreover, Lumumba's plight and his defiance resonated strongly with the African diaspora, particularly with African Americans engaged in the civil rights movement who saw parallels between their struggle and the fight against colonialism in Africa. Malcolm X, for instance, deeply admired Lumumba and even named one of his daughters Ilyasa after Lumumba's daughter Juliana. The story of Lumumba's assassination highlights the ruthless geopolitics of the Cold War era and the lengths to which Western powers would go to protect their strategic and economic interests. His life and death serve as a powerful reminder of the vulnerability of newly independent nations and the immense external pressures they faced. The documentary soundtrack to A Coup d'État, released in late 2024, further explores these themes, linking Lumumba's fate to the civil rights struggle and the exploitation of Congo's resources. Lumumba's legacy endures not just as a historical figure, but as a continuing inspiration for those fighting for justice and self-determination worldwide. Section 9. Remembering Lumumba echoes through time. The efforts to remember and honor Patrice Lumumba continue to this day, reflecting his profound and lasting impact. A particularly poignant chapter in this remembrance unfolded in June 2022, when a gold-capped tooth, believed to be the only remaining physical part of Lumumba, was returned to the Democratic Republic of Congo from Belgium. This relic had been kept for decades by Gerard Soet, the Belgian police commissioner involved in dissolving Lumumba's body. Its return was a deeply symbolic moment, offering a chance for a proper burial and a measure of closure for his family and the nation. King Philippe of Belgium, during a visit to Congo around that time, expressed his deepest regrets for the abuses of the colonial era. The tooth was taken on a tour around Congo, allowing people to pay homage before it was interred in a specially built mausoleum in Kinshasa. This act of remembrance, however, was itself a reminder of the still unsettled legacy of Lumumba and the ongoing struggles in Congo. tragedy.